rising today to speak about an issue that members on both sides of this aisle have a deep concern about, and that's human trafficking, sex trafficking, and specifically the work that we have done to try to stop one website called Backpage.com from selling people online. This morning, along with my colleagues Tom Carper and Claire McCaskill, announced that we have asked the Department of Justice to investigate Backpage.com for criminal violations of the law. This is a criminal referral, and it's a new development in this case. We believe there is sufficient evidence to warrant this criminal review by the Justice Department based on the work that we have done in the Permanent Subcommittee on Investigations. With estimated revenues of more than $150 million a year, Backpage.com is a market leader in commercial sex trafficking and has been linked to hundreds of reported cases of sex trafficking, including trafficking of vulnerable women and children. Backpage has claimed that it, quote, leads the industry in its screening of advertisements for illegal activity, including sex ads for children. That's simply not true. In fact, we now know that this website has long facilitated sex trafficking on its site so it can increase its profits that come at the expense of those being trafficked, including children. When victims or state authorities have tried to bring actions against this company, Backpage has evaded responsibility by saying it doesn't write the ads for sex, it just publishes them. And frankly, as a rule, courts have sided with the company, citing the immunity granted by a federal law that's called the Communications Decency Act. The law, in essence, says that if a company like Backpage publishes an ad someone else gives them, they're not liable. Even though, again, in this case, we know that this website has long facilitated sex trafficking and they know what they're doing. We also now know that Backpage has actively edited words and images that makes them co-creators of these ads. We also know from a new report in the Washington Post just this week that despite claims, Backpage has aggressively solicited and created sex-related ads designed to lure customers. It further demonstrates that Backpage is not merely a passive publisher of third-party content. They're involved. The article found that Backpage workers were active co-creators of many of these sex advertisements, including those that seek to traffic women and young girls, underage girls. I believe the legal consequences should be that they should lose their immunity under the Communications Decency Act. And that's why we've asked the Justice Department today to review this matter. Now, let me be clear about the Communications Decency Act. It has an important purpose. It's a well-intentioned law. It was enacted back in 1996 to protect online publishers. And I support the broader legislation, the Communications Decency Act. But the law was not intended to protect those who knowingly violate the law and facilitate illegal conduct. And it was never intended to protect those who knowingly facilitate the sex trafficking of vulnerable women and girls. We're actively exploring legislation to fix this issue once and for all. I've been working with a bipartisan group of senators on potential legislation, and I'm hopeful that that will soon be introduced here in the United States Senate. We must protect women and underage girls and hold accountable websites that knowingly facilitate this type of criminal exploitation. A couple weeks ago, I was at a place in Ohio called the Ranch of Opportunity. It's in Washington Courthouse. The Ranch of Opportunity opened its doors in the latter part of 2013. It's on a 22-acre site, tranquil setting, peaceful, spacious, healthy environment for girls between 13 and 18 to help find healing and recovery during a residential program. The ranch is a place of hope. As it says in its name, the Ranch of Opportunity. And a lot of the girls who spend time at the ranch have been victims of human trafficking and child abuse. In fact, I'm told that the majority, roughly 60 to 80% of the young girls who come through this program have been trafficked. And as I talk to some of the girls and the staff there, of course, Backpage.com comes up again and again, as it always does when I talk to survivors and victims of human trafficking. These types of crimes, sexual abuse and trafficking, are horrific. But it's happening. It's happening all over the country, and it's happening more and more. So in your community, wherever you live, sadly, I will tell you this is a problem. And part of it is because of these online traffickers. In other words, as many of the survivors of human trafficking have told me, Rob, this has moved from the street corner to the smartphone. And the smartphone is where Backpage.com dominates. In touring the state, by the way, I've also heard over and over about this specific link between drugs and human trafficking. I've talked to survivors who've told me their trafficker first got them hooked on heroin and other drugs. I saw that firsthand in May when I toured the Salvation Army of Greater Cleveland's Harbor Light Complex. They've been operating in Cleveland for 65 years, providing incredibly important service to some of the most vulnerable members of society, including women who've been trafficked. So important to know that that link is there. Both those issues are so important to address, trafficking and what's happening in terms of the increasing heroin, prescription drug, fentanyl crisis in this country, now at epidemic levels. That's why the STOP Act is so important, the Synthetic Trafficking and Overdose Prevention Act that we're trying to get passed here. That's why the Prescription Drug Monitoring Act is so important. There is a connection. Human trafficking requires urgent action, but so does the opioid epidemic. On human trafficking, including sex trafficking, we're now told it's a $150 billion a year industry. Think about that. It's the second biggest criminal enterprise in the world behind the drug trade. Unfortunately, again, it's happening in all of our states. Just last month, a 26-year-old man from Reynoldsburg, Ohio, was indicted on human trafficking charges. He used Backpage.com to advertise the availability of two girls, age 15 and 17, advertised them for sex, and then trafficked them out to several hotels in the area. Thankfully, in this case, members of the Central Ohio Trafficking Task Force rescued both victims, one from Columbus and one from Toledo. Cases like this are alarming, but again, they're happening all over the place. The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, who are experts on this issue, report an 846% increase in reports of suspected child trafficking from 2010 to 2015. That's more than an 800% increase in just 5 years. This spike, the organization found to be, and I quote, directly correlated to the increased use of the internet to sell children for sex. Again, it's the dark side of the internet. And trafficking has now moved, as I said, from the street corner to the cell phone. To confront this problem, as chairman of the Permanent Subcommittee on Investigations, along with my colleagues and then ranking member Claire McCaskill, now Tom Carper, I opened a bipartisan investigation into sex traffickers and their use of the internet. The investigation began over 2 years ago. The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children now says that nearly three-quarters, 73% of all suspected child sex trafficking reports it receives from the general public through its cyber tip line are linked to one website, Backpage.com. According to leading anti-trafficking organizations, including Shared Hope International, service providers working with child sex trafficking victims have reported that between 80 and 100% of their clients have been bought and sold on Backpage.com. Backpage now operates in 97 countries, 934 cities worldwide, and is valued at over $500 million. According to an industry analyst, in 2013, 8 of every $10 spent on online sex trafficking advertising in the United States goes to this one website, Backpage.com. As I said earlier, they say they lead the industry in screening, but in fact, their top lawyer described their screening process as a key tool for disrupting and eventually ending human trafficking. That's just not true. Despite these boasts, the website and its owners consistently refuse to cooperate with our investigation at the Permanent Subcommittee on Investigations. They also, with regard to our inquiry, despite subpoenaing company documents on how they screen advertisements, refuse to provide us documents after a subpoena. As a result, this body, the United States Senate, last year, for the first time in more than 20 years, voted to pass a civil contempt citation, in other words, holding Backpage.com in contempt and requiring them to supply these documents and come forward with this information or else face a lawsuit and potential criminal violations. Finally, last August, after going through the district court, the circuit court, all the way to the Supreme Court, we were able to get their requests to appeal it, reject it, and we were able to get the documents. Over 1 million documents were eventually turned over, including emails and internal documents. We went through them all, and what we found was very troubling, to say the least. After reviewing the documents, the subcommittee published a staff report in January that conclusively shows that Backpage has been more deeply complicit in online underage sex trafficking than anyone ever imagined. The report showed that Backpage has knowingly covered up evidence of crimes by systematically deleting words and images suggestive of illegal conduct, including of child sex trafficking. That editing process sanitized the content of millions of advertisements in order to hide important evidence from law enforcement. I encourage people to take a look at this report. They can look at it on our website and other websites here. myself or from Senator McCaskill. Backpage CEO Carl Ferrer personally directed his employees to create an electronic filter to delete hundreds of words indicative of sex trafficking or prostitution from ads before they were published. In other words, they knew that these ads were about selling girls, selling women online, and yet they published them. Again, this filter that he used did not reject ads because of the obvious illegal activity. They only edited the ads to try to cover up the illegal activity. The filter didn't change what was advertised, it just changed the way it was advertised. Backpage did nothing to stop this criminal activity. They facilitated it knowingly. What did they do? Well, afraid to erode their profits, they were afraid because, as Mr. Ferrer said in his words, it would, quote, piss off a lot of customers. They began deleting words. Beginning in 2010, Backpage automatically deleted words including Lolita, referencing a 12-year-old girl in a book sold for sex, teenage, rape, young, little girl, teen, fresh, innocent, schoolgirl, even Amber Alert. And then they published the edited versions of those ads on their website. They also systematically deleted dozens of words related to prostitution. So again, this filter made these decisions, these deletions, before anyone at Backpage even looked at the ad. When law enforcement officials asked for more information about suspicious ads, as they routinely do, Backpage had already destroyed the original ad posted by the trafficker, so the evidence was gone. So this notion that they were trying to help law enforcement flies in the face of the fact that they actually destroyed the evidence that would have helped law enforcement. So we're never going to know for sure how many girls and women were victimized as a result of this activity. By Backpage's own estimate, the company was editing 70 to 80% of the ads in their adult section by late 2010. Based on our best estimate, this means that Backpage was editing more than 500,000 ads a year, more than 500,000 ads a year. At a hearing on the report, Backpage CEO and other officials pled the Fifth Amendment, invoking their right against self-incrimination, rather than respond to the questions that we had about the report and its findings. We also, though, heard powerful testimony from parents whose children had been trafficked on Backpage. One mother talked about seeing her missing daughter's photograph on Backpage. She frantically called the company to tell them it was her daughter. They finally found her. Please take down the ad. The response? Did you post the ad, ma'am? Her response? Of course I didn't post the ad. It's my daughter. Please take it down. Their response? We can only take it down if you paid for the ad. Talk about heartless. Based on our report, it is clear that Backpage actively facilitated sex trafficking that was taking place on its website, all in order to increase its profits at the expense of vulnerable women and children. And then after the fact, they covered up the evidence of these crimes. So what's happened to these kids is terrible. It's not just tragic to me, it's evil. No one's interested in shutting down legitimate commercial activity and speech. As I said earlier, the Communications Decency Act plays an important role. But we want to stop this criminal activity. So I see some of my colleagues are here to speak. I appreciate their allowing me to finish, but I would also urge all my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to join me in reforming these laws to be able to protect these innocent victims, these children. Mr. President, I yield back my time.